Okay, we are back. I'm your host, Barry Waxler, here with the always lovely and talented Andrea Kay.
Yay! Did you hear that,
And
Stephanie?
her new
I did.
competition, Stephanie Murphy.
Wait, do I get a lovely and
You get
talented?
a lovely and talented
Thank
Stephanie
you.
Murphy, too, okay?
Thank you.
So hopefully your husband's not listening.
Yeah.
And our next guest of today is Howard Farfe from the Ken Blanchard Companies. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great. Well, I have known about Ken Blanchard, and I've read your books for years, but I was unfamiliar with some of the other stuff that you do. So tell us a little bit about Ken Blanchard Companies and what you do.
Yeah, Ken has been around and well known in the world of leadership for probably 35 years, and people really knew him for the One Minute Manager, which he authored, and has actually written probably 35 to 40 additional books since then. But what we do and what the Ken Blanchard Companies does is taken a lot of that content and leadership practices and management models and turned it into effective training programs so that people can actually sit in a classroom, learn, practice, apply, and then go back to the workplace and make a difference in with their direct reports, with their bosses, and with what they're doing day to day. So we're really a leadership development and training firm, and we train companies all over San Diego, but also all over the globe.
Okay, so you are predominantly San Diego or across the country. How do you do it?
You know, about probably 60% of our business is in the U.S., but we have almost 35 to 40% of the business is outside the U.S. So we have some small offices in Toronto, we have one in London, and we have one in Singapore. And then a few other parts of the world where our clients take us, we have found partners who can do training there, and they'll translate our content into their local language.
Wow.
And then deliver it to their clients.
Well, I can tell you that it had to be 20, 30 years ago, I don't know how long ago, that I picked up One Minute Manager, and I loved One Minute Salesperson. It just taught me a whole different style of doing things, and it was wonderful. And the fact that it is now, I shouldn't say now, it's probably been a lot of years, but it is now into a leadership program, I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about how a leadership program works. What do you do when you get inside of a company and you start working with the employees?
Yeah. So we will sometimes work with large organizations who have maybe thousands of managers. And so they will want to get a lot of their managers using a common leadership language. So they will bring in, we have over 100 trainers that are based all over the world. And we will bring in our trainers to their facilities and typically have maybe 15 to 20 people in a classroom, typically for maybe a 2-day leadership workshop. And then there's usually follow-up. And more we're doing these things, we're doing a lot of the training online, virtual, sometimes via a WebEx solution. So depending on what the organization needs, we can kind of do it face-to-face, or we can do it virtual, or they can sit at their own computer at night and go through some of the training. But there's always a component, almost always a component that is live so that they can practice.
So it's a core that you put out a course for them start to finish versus a classroom training, or probably both, but it's predominantly through a course.
Yeah, it's through a course, and a lot of times there's follow-up coaching that can be done over the phone to make sure that people got it, they're applying it, because what happens if you don't use something you've learned in like those first 48 hours, 72 hours, about 2/3 of it just goes away right out of your brain. And then if you don't use it for that next week, maybe the rest of it is gone. So we really believe in kind of sustainability practices, which is really about sustaining the learning and making sure people put it into practice. Yeah. And I think what we found, which was really interesting and kind of what brought me to Blanchard, is how important the relationship between a manager and their direct report is. And that I think the research shows that the number one reason that people leave organizations is often because of that relationship. So what we're trying to do is help leaders become more effective leaders, better managers, so that they can retain and attract the best employees through kind of better leadership practices.
How do you measure that? Do you measure a reduced turnover rate, or increased in terms of sales against the bottom line? How do you measure the effectiveness of your programs?
Yes, and yes. That's a great question, and it's one of the tough ones because people look at this and say, "Oh, that's soft skill, how to measure it." And I don't know nutrition. Turnover problem, and we do these activities. They're always complaining about their bosses. We've got leadership challenge, leadership. What kind of benchmark? Nutrition has been undesirable, losing good people, and will matter for and after. Also has been involved in training sales measures, not about sales, but just sales organization. And for that, we can use metrics around what kind of revenue we're doing in each region. And before now, they either have a few more on the revenue at now person versus prior. And so you There's a lot of productivity measures you can also use. There's some stage use because morale goes down. Many people suddenly start feeling sick. And so all those you can convert into dollars, and people start to realize this is really get a very significant return on investment when you invest in leadership.
Interesting. Are there any industries that kind of dominate the type of clients you work with?
Not really. It is industries who have people, and it's amazing how a lot of the clients we'll work with will say, well, you don't understand what our culture is like or what our industry is like. And it is always kind of interesting to hear that. But the human relations aspects and the human nature pretty much translates across whether we work with telecommunications, financial services, biotech, all those things, and they all have that human element where you've got to be able to relate to your direct report or to your supervisor and, really enjoy what we're all about is trying to unleash that power and potential of individuals and their organizations. And if you're feeling good about the work you're doing and how your manager is treating you and caring about you, it's amazing how much your work improves.
Yeah, so you've tapped into human nature and that people are people regardless of the industry.
Yeah.
I love that.
And it translates, we were amazed with, I think, how well it translates to other cultures, not work cultures, but foreign cultures. And, the fact that we have an office in Singapore and that our programs are translated into Chinese, and you say, well, wow, Western practices versus Asian practices, very different. Well, they are pretty different. But, our flagship program, which is situational leadership, translates incredibly well. And they use it, and they use the same type of practice. They might change some of the words, but it works globally.
The amazing thing that I'm thinking here is where we were at yesterday. I was speaking at a national conference called America's Top Planner, right? And there were about 300 planners in the room, and I could not imagine a group of people that would be a better target or a better prospect for gain benefit for what you do.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I can think of every company I ever worked for when I did corporate sales that could have benefited because it was all about the manager doing performance evaluations of the people beneath them, not the other way around. And I kept telling myself, how come nobody's ever asking those of us on the lower levels of the org chart what we think about leadership and management? They never ask until it's the exit interview.
That's right.
Yeah, well, I kind of took a little different direction. I thought about a lot of the independent contractors or the self-employed industry that comes, take the insurance industry or the securities industry. While we all have our connections and our registrations and our licensing and what have you, but it's a group of independents that don't have the leadership. Yeah. That could be filtered down from what you do. I think there would be a great market there.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. We've seen success in some of those kind of professional organizations as well as large corporate environments.
Yeah, that's great. You're listening to Close Up on San Diego Business here on KFSD AM 1450 and financialnewsandtalk.com. I'm your host, Barry Waxler, here with my co-hosts Andrea Kay and Stephanie Murphy. And we have our guest is Howard Farfe from the Ken Blanchard Companies. I have to say this one more time. I have been a big fan of your company for a very long time. So you're one of the people that I've wanted on here for a long time. I just didn't know it.
Thank you.
Until my hero next to me brought you in.
Now, you've been with them for quite a while and worn some different hats there. Tell us about your time at Ken Blanchard.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I, had been a big fan, and I was actually a client. So I was going through a program, like I mentioned, situational leadership, and what that's all about is, learning that as a leader, depending on the situation, you've got to use a different leadership style. And it's all about developing flexible leadership styles. So you can't always be a micromanager. You can't always be a delegator or a coach or whatever it is in between. You've got to look at each situation and diagnose it and then decide, okay, my direct report really needs to be listened to right now. Or they're lost. They really need a highly directive leadership style. And so I was going through situational leadership as a client working in another organization. And there's kind of an exercise about, worst boss, best boss. I started to realize I was kind of working with one of those really bad bosses, and it was they treated me the same regardless of task. And even when I knew what I was doing, it was a micromanagement kind of style. And I kind of fell in love with this model. Didn't even realize Ken Blanchard and the organization was out there in Escondido, very close to where I was in San Diego, and kind of connected with that organization and said, wow, if I could actually work in an organization where I believe so much in the product and the process that they sell, it would really be rewarding. And so, my background was primarily in marketing and product management, and I went into Blanchard mostly doing that, got involved in the global sales organization, and then 3 years ago got the opportunity to be president.
Wow.
I have a side question. Something just hit me while you were talking. And we're working with another company that is building what we believe will be a great brand, but it's a different market. It's a global mobile workforce, okay, where they believe that the entire the world is floating towards working from a mobile basis. Okay, where wouldn't there be some type of a tie-in where we could build a program and help those that are out there working on a mobile basis?
Yeah, that's certainly, we are kind of investing a lot more in our technology kind of solutions and people who want to learn via mobile device. There's also just the reality of what is the working relationship like when everybody is working virtual. So we have a program around virtual teams. Then you suddenly don't have the body language or the eye contact. So when you're working virtually, what are some of the nuances you have to consider about how you're coming across on the speakerphone or on email? And so, yeah, that's, I think, a real trend that we're watching as millennials enter the workforce more and more. They're expecting to be more of a mobile workforce. So, yeah, there's a lot of interest in that right now.
We were just listening to Steve Wesley yesterday, former state controller of California. He was one of the speakers up there, and he talked about the millennial segment. And believe it or not, where we had baby boomers being one of the largest segments in our population, which we won't say who's a baby boomer in the room here. We'll leave that one be. But and it went to the Gen X generation, which was really very small, and now the millennial set is 30% bigger than the baby boomers were. It's a whole new world coming in.
That's right, and I think we read by 2020 there's going to be, gosh, I want to say it's over 50% of the workforce might be from the millennials, and so if we're not thinking about that, and large organizations aren't thinking about how that's going to change and how do the baby boomers work with the millennials and vice versa, then we're probably going to have a lot of challenge retaining good employees.
Now, and a lot of people think of Ken Blanchard from the 1 minute manager from years ago. How do you adopt or are the original concepts still in play with the millennial set, and whether or not somebody's mobile, or are you guys constantly evaluating your programs and modifying it for today's workforce?
Yeah, we're always modifying. Some of the lasting principles, are time tested and proven and still work. How you communicate, some of the words you choose, how it's trained, maybe more in chunks and sound bites. A lot of millennials are not going to want to sit around for a day or 2 days. So a lot of it is just how is the message and the training delivered has to be different. So we're always evolving the modalities and things of how
coming up with your hashtags on Twitter.
Sure, yeah, exactly. You got to be involved in social media. We got Ken out there at 75, and he's out there on Facebook and tweeting all the time. And so it's you got to keep moving.
Did you hear that, Barry? I'm trying to get Barry into social media. He's too busy.
I'm in social media. I just need help doing it.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, because you're busy.
So, well, we're running short on time. Tell our listeners how they can find out more about Ken Blanchard Companies.
Sure. Our website is kenblanchard.com. Headquarters are right there, out there in Escondido, but you can find a lot of kind of what we do and how we do it at our website.
Okay. So kenblanchard.com. Any other words of wisdom to leave us with?
I think just that what I think we've been most proud of is getting people to look at leadership differently and realize that relationship and the impact of having good leadership in an organization can make a world of difference in terms of productivity. So we're excited about the business and the work that we're in, and that more and more people are kind of intrigued by that.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you that your work speaks for itself. You've been nominated as San Diego Business Journal top Communicator Awards, and there was one award you were.
Yeah, I think we're most proud, being one of the best companies to work for in San Diego. Perfect. And so year in, year out, we kind of get that award.
And with over 300 employees there, my hat's off to you. You do a great job for all of us in San Diego here.
Yeah.
So thanks for being with us.